Ambassador Velkith had heard the stories since he was a child. Every species in the Galactic Concord knew them. They were told in dark rooms to frighten young ones into obedience. They were whispered in military academies as warnings. They were spoken of in temples as proof that the universe could create true monsters. The story spoke of a world that should not exist. A planet with gravity so strong that it crushed the bones of visitors. A world where the very air was made of fire, where oxygen burned through metal and flesh alike. Water fell from the sky like acid rain. The ground shook and split open. Mountains spat fire into the heavens. And somehow, impossibly, life had found a way to survive there. Not just survive, thrive. The creatures born of this nightmare world were called many names. The Death Worlders, the Persistence Hunters, the Terrans, but most simply called them humans. Velkith stretched his forearms and made a sound of disbelief. He had served as ambassador for the Sirene hegemony for 40 cycles. He had met hundreds of species from across the galaxy. He had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. And in all that time, he had never once seen proof that humans were real. No ships, no bodies, no technology, no recordings. The coordinates where their homeworld supposedly existed led to empty space. The elder races claimed to have met them once, thousands of cycles ago, but their records were sealed. When pressed, they simply said that some knowledge was too dangerous to share. Velkith believed it was all a lie, a useful fiction created by the elder races to keep younger species afraid and obedient. After all, what better way to control a galaxy than to make everyone believe that monsters lurked in the darkness between stars? He was sitting in his private chamber on the diplomatic station when his assistant rushed in. The young Sirene was pale, his scales almost white with fear. "Ambassador," the assistant said, "something has happened. Something terrible." Velkith rose slowly. In his experience, most things that seemed terrible were simply inconvenient. "What is it?" "The Crethful Dominion. They attacked a mining colony in the Orion Spur 3 days ago." This was not surprising. The Dominion attacked colonies all the time. They were conquerors, pure and simple. They had destroyed or enslaved over 200 worlds in the past century. The Galactic Concord condemned their actions, but did nothing to stop them. The Dominion fleet was too powerful. "And?" Velkith asked. "They lost, Ambassador. They lost badly." Now Velkith was interested. He moved closer to his assistant. "Explain." 40 warships attacked the colony. Only 28 survived. The rest were destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Velkith felt his heart beat faster. This was impossible. The Dominion had the strongest fleet in the galaxy. No minor colony could destroy 12 of their warships. Who defended the colony? Was it an ambush? Did one of the major powers intervene? His assistant's scales grew even paler. "No, Ambassador. The defenders were. They matched no species in our records. They came from ships we have never seen before. Ships that used weapons we do not understand." He handed Velkith a data tablet. On the screen was a frozen image from a Dominion ship's sensors. Velkith studied it carefully. The defending ships were strange indeed. They were blocky and rough, without the smooth curves that most species preferred. They looked almost primitive. But there was something about their design that made Velkith uncomfortable. They looked solid, heavy, built to take punishment and keep fighting. "Play the recording," Velkith said. The image began to move. He watched the unknown ships emerge from behind a moon. They flew in tight formation, moving together like a single organism. The Dominion commander fired warning shots, expecting the defenders to flee or surrender. Instead, the unknown ships accelerated. They flew directly at the Dominion fleet, their weapons firing continuously. Velkith saw flashes of light as solid projectiles tore through Dominion shields. He saw explosions that seemed to follow the fleeing ships, as if the weapons themselves were hunting their targets. He watched as one Dominion cruiser after another was torn apart. The Dominion ships tried to retreat. The unknown vessels chased them. They were faster, more aggressive, more coordinated. They fought like predators running down wounded prey. Then Velkith saw something that made his blood freeze. One of the unknown ships was badly damaged, its hull torn open, fire spreading through its compartments. By all logic, the crew should have fled or surrendered. Instead, the ship accelerated even faster. It rammed directly into a Dominion battleship, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion. They had killed themselves to take an enemy with them. Velkith stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. "There is more, Ambassador," his assistant said quietly. "The unknown ships broadcast a message before the Dominion fled. We have translated it." He touched the tablet, and a voice filled the room. It was harsh and rough, speaking in a language that sounded like grinding stones. But the translation appeared on the screen. "This system is under the protection of the Krantava United Earth Navy. Hostile action will be met with overwhelming force. You have been warned. Earth, Terra, the Death World." Velkith sat down slowly. His mind was racing. For 3,000 cycles, the galaxy had told stories of humans. For 3,000 cycles, most species had believed those stories were myths. And now, in a single afternoon, everything had changed. The humans were real. He thought about the legends again, but this time he did not dismiss them. He thought about creatures with internal skeletons that healed themselves when broken. He thought about beings that could survive for days without sleep, that could adapt to almost any environment, that could push through pain that would kill other species. He thought about endurance hunters who chased their prey for hours until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. He thought about that damaged ship ramming the Dominion battleship. No hesitation. No fear. Just a cold decision to take an enemy with them into death. What had the galaxy awakened? His assistant spoke again. "Ambassador, there is one more thing. The Dominion is calling an emergency meeting of their war council. Our spies report that they are gathering every ship they have. They want to find Earth. They want to destroy the humans before the humans destroy them," Velkith finished. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between those stars, monsters from legend had revealed themselves. And the Dominion, fools that they were, wanted to start a war with them. Velkith did not know what would happen next. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never be the same again. Commander Rethgar had conquered 11 worlds in his career. He had burned cities and broken armies. He had watched entire civilizations surrender at the mere sight of his flagship. In all his years of service to the Krethful Dominion, he had never known fear. Until today, he stood on the bridge of the inevitable conquest, the largest warship in the Dominion fleet. Around him, his crew worked in terrified silence. The air smelled of smoke and fear. On the main view screen, the wreckage of 12 Dominion warships drifted through space, still burning. 6 minutes. It had taken the enemy only 6 minutes to destroy nearly a third of his fleet. Rethgar replayed the battle in his mind, trying to understand what had happened. His force of 40 warships had arrived at the Mayan colony, expecting easy prey. The colony had no military value. It was just a small outpost on the edge of known space, harvesting minerals from asteroids. By all logic, it should have surrendered immediately. Instead, those ships had appeared. They had emerged from behind the colony's largest moon, moving in perfect formation. Rethgar had counted 15 vessels, all of them smaller than his cruisers. Their hulls were gray and ugly, covered with what looked lighting. Their weapons appeared primitive, just simple tubes pointed outward. He had almost laughed when he saw them. He was not laughing now. When he ordered his fleet to fire warning shots, the enemy vessels had not slowed down. They had not turned. They had not sent any message requesting negotiation. Instead, they had accelerated directly toward his fleet, their primitive weapons coming to life. The first shots had been confusing. Rethger's sensors detected no energy beams, no plasma bursts, no particle weapons. Just small metal objects moving at incredible speed. His tactical officer had dismissed them as harmless. Dominion shields could stop any physical projectile. That tactical officer was dead now, killed when one of those harmless projectiles punched through the inevitable Conquest's shields as if they did not exist. The metal slug had torn through 3 decks before finally stopping in the ship's reactor housing. Only luck had prevented a complete breach. Rethger still did not understand how it was possible. Dominion shields were designed to stop energy weapons. Physical projectiles should have been even easier to block. But these weapons were different. They moved faster than anything Rethger had ever seen. They hit with force that should have been impossible. And worst of all, some of them exploded after impact, spreading fire and death through the interior of his ships. The enemy had not stopped with simple projectiles. Some of their weapons released objects that followed Dominion ships even when they tried to flee. These objects adjusted their course, chasing their targets with mechanical determination. When they struck, the explosions were massive. Enough to break a cruiser in half, but none of that was. What truly frightened Rethger, what frightened him, was the way the enemy fought. Every species in the galaxy fought according to certain rules. When you were outgunned, you retreated. When your ship was badly damaged, you surrendered. When you were clearly going to lose, you negotiated. These were not just tactics. They were survival instincts. Every intelligent species understood that living to fight another day was better than dying for nothing. The enemy did not follow these rules. Rethger had watched one of their ships take hit after hit from Dominion weapons. Its hull had been torn open. Fire had spread through its compartments. Any sane crew would have abandoned ship or surrendered. Instead, the vessel had increased its speed. It had flown directly at the Dominion battleship Eternal Flame, firing its weapons until the very last moment. Then it had crashed into the battleship's midsection, and both ships had vanished in a ball of fire. They had killed themselves, just to kill their enemy. Another enemy ship had been disabled, its engines destroyed, its weapons silenced. Rethger had ordered a boarding party to capture the vessel and take prisoners. The boarding party had never returned. Later, sensor recordings showed what had happened. The enemy crew had been waiting for them. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the creatures inside that ship had fought hand-to-hand against trained Dominion warriors, and they had won. The recordings showed beings in strange suits, wielding weapons that fired metal projectiles like their ships. They moved with terrifying coordination, covering each other, advancing step by step through the corridors. When one of them was injured, it did not stop fighting. It simply kept going, shooting with one hand while pressing the other against its wound. One of the creatures had been struck by a Dominion blade, cutting deep into its side. Any Rethger soldier would have collapsed from such a wound. The creature had simply grabbed the blade, pulled it out of its own body, and used it to kill the soldier who had struck it. Then it had kept fighting for another 10 minutes before finally collapsing from blood loss. What kind of species could do such things? Rethger had ordered the retreat after that. His remaining ships had fled into hyperspace, leaving the battlefield behind. The enemy had not pursued. They had simply watched as the Dominion fled, their ugly gray ships holding position around the colony they had protected. Now Rethger sat in his command chair, staring at the stars outside his window. His superiors would demand answers. They would want to know how a simple mining colony had destroyed 12 warships. They would want to know about the enemy's weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. Rethker had no answers to give them. He only had fear. The enemy had broadcast a single message during the battle. His translators had worked on it for hours before finally breaking the code. The message was simple and direct. This system is under the protection of the United Earth Navy. Hostile action will be met with overwhelming force. You have been warned. Earth. Rethker had never heard of it. His navigators could find no record of any planet by that name. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning. He had attacked a colony protected by creatures from legend. Creatures that did not retreat. Creatures that did not surrender. Creatures that would rather die than accept defeat. The Dominion had built its empire by being the most ruthless force in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds because no one could match their brutality. Their willingness to destroy anything that stood in their way. Rethker now understood that they had never faced a truly ruthless enemy. Not until today, he gave orders for his fleet to return to Dominion space at maximum speed. His superiors needed to hear his report. They needed to understand what they were facing. They needed to prepare for what was coming, because Rethker knew, deep in his hearts, that those gray ships would not simply wait for the Dominion to attack again. Creatures like that did not wait. They hunted Dot, and now the Dominion had given them a reason to hunt. Rethker stared at the stars and wondered how long the Dominion had left to live. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UEN Defiant and watched 3,000 enemy warships emerge from hyperspace. The Dominion had come in force, just as Earth's intelligence had predicted. They had brought every ship they could spare, determined to crush humanity before it could become a true threat. Helena almost smiled. They were already too late. Behind her, the combined fleet of the United Earth Navy waited in formation. 400 ships against 3,000. The odds seemed impossible. Any other species would have surrendered. Any other species would have tried to negotiate, to bargain, to find some way to survive. Humans were not any other species. Helena had been a soldier for 30 years. She had fought in the Outer Colony Wars, survived the Mars Rebellion, led the defense of Jupiter Station during the Pirate Uprising. She had seen friends die. She had made impossible choices. She had learned, through blood and pain, what it meant to be human. It meant never giving up. It meant fighting until your last breath. It meant making the enemy pay for every inch of ground they took. Admiral, her tactical officer, reported, "The Dominion fleet is holding position. They are broadcasting a demand for surrender." Helena listened to the message. The Dominion commander spoke of mercy and forgiveness. He promised that Earth would be treated well if they submitted peacefully. He warned that resistance would mean total destruction. It was a good speech. Helena almost respected it. "No response," she ordered. "All ships, prepare for combat. We fight in 3 minutes." Across the fleet, human crews prepared for battle. They loaded weapons and charged shields. They said prayers to gods they barely believed in. They looked at pictures of families they might never see again. And then, when the time came, they did what humans had always done. They attacked. The Dominion expected the humans to hold position and fight defensively. They expected to use their superior numbers to surround and destroy the smaller fleet. They had prepared tactics for a defensive battle. Instead, 400 human ships accelerated to maximum speed and drove directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The first hour of the Battle of Proxima was chaos. Human ships wove through the Dominion fleet like wolves among sheep, firing in all directions, never staying still long enough to be targeted. Their projectile weapons tore through enemy shields. Their missiles chased fleeing ships and detonated against their hulls. Their crews fought with a ferocity that the Dominion had never encountered. Helena watched the battle from her command chair, giving orders with calm precision. She had trained for this moment her entire life. Every human in the fleet had trained for this moment. They knew the stakes. They knew that if they failed, Earth would burn. They did not intend to fail. The Dominion began to adapt. They spread their formation, making it harder for human ships to find targets. They concentrated fire on damaged vessels, trying to score kills before the humans could retreat. They brought their largest battleships forward, using their heavy weapons to create zones of death that human ships could not cross. Helena adjusted her tactics. She ordered her fleet to split into smaller groups, each one targeting a different section of the enemy formation. She had her damaged ships fall back and form a reserve, ready to reinforce wherever the line was weakest. She sent her fastest ships around the enemy flanks, forcing them to divide their attention. The battle stretched into its second hour, then its third, then its fourth. By the end of the first day, the Dominion had lost over 500 ships. The humans had lost 60, but the humans could not replace their losses. Every ship that died was gone forever. The Dominion still had more than 2,000 warships, and reinforcements were on the way. Helena knew they could not win a battle of attrition. They needed something more. On the second day, she gave the order she had hoped to avoid. All ships, prepare for boarding operations. The Dominion did not believe it at first. No species boarded enemy ships in the middle of a battle. It was suicide. The risks were too great, the rewards too small. Only a fool would try it. Humans were not fools. But they were stubborn enough to try anyway. Small boarding ships detached from the human fleet and accelerated toward Dominion vessels. Defensive fire destroyed many of them, but many more got through. They latched onto enemy hulls and cut through the metal with fusion torches. Then human soldiers poured into the ships, fighting hand-to-hand against crews that had never faced close combat. The Dominion were larger than humans. They were stronger. They had claws and fangs and armored scales. By every measure, they should have won easily. They did not win. Humans fought with weapons and fists and teeth. When their weapons ran empty, they picked up enemy weapons and kept shooting. When they were wounded, they bandaged themselves and kept fighting. When they were surrounded, they fought back-to-back with their companions and refused to surrender. One boarding team of 20 humans captured a Dominion battleship with a crew of 300. They did it in 40 minutes. Stories began to spread through the Dominion fleet. Stories of humans who took wounds that should have killed them and kept fighting. Stories of soldiers who smiled before charging into enemy fire. Stories of crews who destroyed their own ships rather than let them be captured. On the third day, the Dominion fleet broke. It did not happen all at once. First, one captain fled into hyperspace without orders. Then another. Then a dozen. Then 100. Within hours, the carefully organized Dominion formation had dissolved into chaos as ships fought each other to escape. Helena did not order a pursuit. Her fleet was exhausted. More than half her ships were damaged. Thousands of her people were dead or wounded. She had won, but the cost had been terrible. She watched the Dominion survivors flee and felt no joy. Only relief that it was over. Later, historians would call Proxima the most important battle in galactic history. They would analyze every tactic, study every maneuver, debate every decision. They would write books about Helena Vance and the 400 ships that broke the largest fleet ever assembled. But for Helena, standing on the bridge of her battered flagship, watching the stars burn with the wreckage of thousands of ships, there was only one thought in her mind. They had survived. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to die. Now came the harder part. Now they had to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Would they become conquerors like the Dominion? Would they use their victory to build an empire of fear? Or would they find another way? Helena did not know the answer. But as she looked at her crew, saw the exhaustion and grief and pride in their faces, she knew one thing with certainty. whatever humanity chose to do next. No one in the galaxy would ever underestimate them again. The myth had become flesh. The monsters from legend had revealed themselves, and they had proven that every story, every whispered warning, every tale of human endurance and human ferocity had been true. The galaxy would never be the same. The video spread across the galaxy like a disease. Within 3 days, every major species had seen it. Within a week, it had reached even the most remote colonies. Children watched it in schools. Soldiers watched it in barracks. Leaders watched it in their private chambers, playing it again and again. Trying to understand what they were seeing, Ambassador Velkith had watched it 17 times. Each time, he noticed something new, something that made his fear grow deeper. He noticed how the human ships never stopped moving. Other species fought in formation, holding position and trading fire from a distance. The humans attacked constantly, circling their enemies like predators around wounded prey. They gave the Dominion no time to think, no time to adjust. They simply kept hitting until their enemy broke. He noticed how their damaged ships did not retreat. One vessel had lost half its weapons and most of its engines. Instead of fleeing, it had pushed forward, using its remaining guns to provide cover for its companions. The crew had known they were going to die. They had chosen to make their death useful. He noticed how quickly they adapted. Early in the battle, the Dominion had tried to concentrate fire on single targets. The humans had immediately changed their formation, spreading out to make targeting harder. When the Dominion tried to flee, the humans had anticipated their escape routes and cut them off. Every tactic the Dominion used, the humans countered within seconds. These were not mindless monsters. These were intelligent, experienced warriors who had fought many battles before. And somehow, the galaxy had never known they existed. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices rising in argument and fear. Some demanded immediate action against the humans. Others argued for caution. A few of the elder races said nothing at all, their ancient faces unreadable. Velkith watched them argue and felt only despair. None of them understood. None of them had truly listened to the legends. A representative from a minor species stood and declared that the humans were obviously primitive. Their weapons were simple projectiles, nothing compared to the energy weapons used by civilized species. Their ships were ugly and rough. Surely a coordinated effort by the Concord could destroy them easily. Velkith rose to respond. The chamber fell silent. "You call their weapons primitive," he said, his voice echoing through the vast room. "Those primitive weapons destroyed 12 Dominion warships in 6 minutes. Those primitive projectiles punched through shields that were designed to stop our most advanced weapons. Do you know why?" No one answered. "Because we designed our shields to stop energy," Velkith continued. "Plasma, particle beams, lasers. We never imagined that anyone would be foolish enough to use physical projectiles. We thought we had moved beyond such crude methods." He paused. The humans did not move beyond them. They perfected them. He pulled up data on the main display. Analysis of the battle recordings shows that their projectiles travel at nearly 1% of light speed. They hit with more force than any weapon we have ever created. And unlike our energy weapons, they do not lose power over distance. A shot from a human ship will kill you just as easily from 1,000,000 kilometers as from 100. The chamber erupted in nervous whispers. "But that is not what frightens me most," Velkith said. "What frightens me is what the humans did not do. They did not chase the fleeing Dominion ships. They did not pursue them into hyperspace. They simply let them go." A representative from the Dominion's rival empire sneered. "Perhaps they were too damaged to pursue." "No," Velkith said. "Their ships were barely scratched. They could have caught the Dominion easily. They chose not to. Do you understand what that means? Silence. They showed mercy, Velkith said. They had the power to destroy every Dominion ship in that system. They chose to let them run. These creatures, these monsters from legend, these Deathworlders who supposedly know nothing but violence and destruction. They showed more restraint than any of us would have. You let that sink in. The legends tell us that humans are unstoppable killers. But the legends are incomplete. The humans are not mindless. They are not savage. They are intelligent and controlled and patient. And that makes them far more dangerous than any monster. The elder representatives finally spoke. Their voices were old and tired, carrying the weight of millennia. They confirmed what Velkith had suspected. Humans were real. The elder races had met them once long ago in the early days of the Concord. They had been terrified by what they found, not because humans were violent, because humans were kind. The humans had offered friendship. They had offered trade. They had offered to share their technology and their knowledge. And the elder races, looking at these creatures from a world that should have killed them, seeing their strength and their resilience and their terrible potential, had made a decision. They had refused. They had asked the humans to leave and never return. They had sealed all records of the contact. They had allowed the legends to spread, hoping that fear would keep anyone from seeking the humans out. For 3,000 cycles. It had worked. Now the Dominion had awakened them. News arrived before the session ended. The Krethval Dominion had issued a formal declaration. They were assembling the largest fleet in galactic history. 3,000 warships, pulled from every corner of their empire. They intended to find Earth and destroy it before the humans could spread further. Velkith felt sick. The Dominion still did not understand. They thought this was just another war, just another species to be conquered and enslaved. They did not realize what they were truly facing. The humans had hidden for 3,000 cycles. They had watched the galaxy from the shadows, learning about its species, its politics, its weaknesses. They had built their ships and trained their warriors in secret. And now, when they finally revealed themselves, they had won a battle against the Dominion's best ships with a force less than half the size Dot. This was not a primitive species caught by surprise. This was a civilization that had been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. The Dominion thought they were going to hunt the humans. Velkith knew the truth. The humans had been waiting for someone to give them an excuse. And now the Dominion had done exactly that. The hunter was about to become the prey. As the Concord session dissolved into chaos, Velkith made a quiet decision. He would reach out to the humans himself. He would try to establish contact before the Dominion's invasion began. Perhaps, if he was very lucky, he could convince them that not all species in the galaxy were their enemies. Perhaps he could prevent the extinction of his people. Because Velkith had studied the legends carefully. He knew what happened when humans went to war. He knew about their history of conflict, their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. He knew that they had nearly destroyed themselves many times before they reached the stars. If the Dominion attacked Earth, the humans would not simply defend themselves. They would end the Dominion forever, and Velkith was not sure they would stop there. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima, Ambassador Velkith stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Concord and watched history unfold. The seats were filled with representatives from over 200 species. Every one of them was silent. Every one of them was afraid. A human delegation had arrived. They entered the chamber in a group of 12. Velkith studied them carefully, seeing for the first time the creatures he had only known through legend. They were smaller than he had expected, shorter than most species in the Concord. Their bodies were soft and fragile-looking, with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. They walked on 2 legs with a strange rolling motion, as if they were always about to fall forward. They did not look dangerous. They looked almost harmless, but Velkith knew better. He had seen the battle recordings. He had read the reports from Proxima. He knew what those soft bodies could do. The leader of the delegation stepped forward. She was a female human with gray hair and hard eyes. Her uniform was simple and dark, marked with symbols that Velkith did not recognize. But he noticed the burns on her hands, the scars on her face, the slight limp in her step. This was Admiral Helena Vance, the human who had broken the Dominion. She looked around the chamber with an expression that Velkith could not read. Then she began to speak. 3,000 cycles ago, she said, humanity first met the species of this galaxy. We came in peace. We offered friendship. We wanted to learn from you and share what we knew. Instead, you turned us away. You told us we were too dangerous. You asked us to leave and never return. The chamber was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. We respected your wishes, Helena continued. We went home. We stayed hidden. We watched from the darkness as your civilizations grew and changed. We saw you build wonders. We also saw you build horrors. We saw the Dominion rise and conquer world after world. We saw species enslaved and destroyed. We saw children murdered for the crime of being born on the wrong planet. Her voice grew harder. We did nothing. We stayed hidden because you asked us to. Because we believed you when you said we were monsters. Because we were afraid of what we might become if we stopped hiding. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. The Dominion attacked one of our colonies. They killed innocent miners who had never raised a weapon in anger. And something changed. We realized that hiding had not made us better. It had only allowed evil to grow. Alana looked directly at the elder representatives, the ancient beings who had turned humanity away so long ago. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to punish you for what happened 3,000 cycles ago. We are here to offer you the same thing we offered before. Friendship. Whispers spread through the chamber. Velkith heard fear and disbelief in those voices. After everything that had happened, the humans wanted peace? Helena raised her hand for silence. We know what we are. We know what evolution made us. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. We survived by being persistent, adaptable, and yes, violent when we needed to be. We have teeth in our souls that no amount of civilization can remove. She smiled then, a small sad smile that made Velkith's hearts ache. But we also have something else. We have choice. We can decide what to do with our strength. And we have decided that we do not want to be conquerors. We do not want to rule the galaxy through fear. We want to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She turned to address the full chamber. The Dominion is broken. Their fleet is destroyed. Their empire is collapsing. Worlds they enslaved are rising up and claiming their freedom. This is good. This is justice. Her voice hardened again. But there will be others. There will always be species who believe that strength gives them the right to dominate the weak. And when those species rise, they will find humanity waiting. She let those words hang in the air. We are offering the Galactic Concord a simple choice. Accept us as members. Work with us as equals. Let us help you build something better than what came before. Or refuse, and we will return to the shadows. We will not force ourselves upon you. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Velkith rose to his feet. I have a question, Admiral, he said. His voice was steady, though his hearts were pounding. Helena turned to face him. Ask. At Proxima, you lost many ships, many lives. Your people suffered terribly. And yet, in the recordings I have seen, your soldiers... He paused, struggling to find the right words. They were smiling. Even as they died, some of them were smiling. Why? Helena was silent for a moment. When she answered, her voice was quiet. Because they were doing what they were born to do. They were protecting innocent people from monsters. They were giving their lives for something that mattered. She met his eyes. For humans, there is no greater honor. Velkith felt something shift in his chest. All his life, he had believed the legends about humans. He had believed they were monsters, creatures of pure violence, beings who knew nothing but destruction. Now, standing in the same room with them, he understood how wrong he had been. Humans were not monsters. They were warriors with souls. They were killers who chose mercy. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they had decided to use that danger to protect the weak. That was more terrifying than any legend. It was also more beautiful. Velkith looked around the chamber at the other representatives. He saw fear in their faces. But he also saw something else. Hope. I vote to accept humanity into the Galactic Concord, Velkith said. And I suspect I am not alone. One by one, other representatives rose. One by one, they added their voices to his. The vote was not unanimous. Some species were too afraid, too proud, too stubborn to accept the humans among them. But the majority agreed. Humanity was no longer a myth. They were members of the galactic community. After the session ended, Velkith approached the human delegation. Admiral Vance was speaking quietly with her officers. They laughed at something one of them said, clasping each other's shoulders in casual affection. Despite everything they had been through, despite the thousands of dead they had left behind at Proxima, they seemed happy. Velkith watched them and felt a chill run down his spine. The old legends had warned of creatures who could not be stopped. Creatures who would fight until the stars burned out. Creatures who faced death and smiled. The legends had not lied. But they had missed the most important truth. Humans were not monsters. They were something far more dangerous. They were good people who had learned to be monsters when they needed to be. And now they had chosen to protect the galaxy. Velkith watched the human delegation leave the chamber and made a silent promise. He would spend the rest of his life making sure the galaxy deserved their protection. He would work to build a future where humans never had to become monsters again, because he understood now what the Patty and elder races had feared 3,000 cycles ago. They had not feared human violence. They had feared human love, a species that would die to protect strangers, a species that would sacrifice everything for people they had never met, a species that smiled in the face of death because they knew their deaths had meaning. That was not a monster. That was a hero. And heroes, Velkith knew, changed everything they touched. The galaxy would never be the same. But for the first time in his life, Velkith believed it might become something better. He looked up at the stars beyond the chamber's windows and smiled. The age of monsters was over. The age of heroes had begun.